At Nelly's Air Force Base, mornings came like clockwork, sharp and metallic. The desert sun clawed its way over the horizon, glinting off the hangars and asphalt like a harsh spotlight. Mara Hale walked into the maintenance bay before most even brewed coffee. Her boots made no sound against the concrete, her movements fluid, almost too deliberate. The name Ghost Tech had followed her like a whisper through the ranks, though few had ever seen her in action. No one knew where the name originated. Some said it was because she could appear behind a console and repair a failing aircraft system faster than the human eye could track. Others whispered it was because she seemed to vanish into shadows, moving with uncanny silence, leaving no trace of herself behind. Mara never corrected them. Why spoil a reputation she didn't intend to use? She paused near an F-35 parked under a giant hangar, studying its avionics panel. The aircraft gleamed under fluorescent lights, but it was more than metal and composite. She saw its heartbeat, every wire, every microchip. Her fingers brushed the surface, tracing hidden circuits, memorizing its quirks. A soft hiss of hydraulic fluid punctuated the stillness. She worked quickly, efficiently. A few subtle tweaks, minor recalibrations, and the jet hummed with a vitality it hadn't had before. She stepped back, wiping her hands on a rag, and disappeared down the corridor before anyone could notice. The maintenance crew barely glanced up. Ghost Tech had always been a myth to them, a convenient scapegoat for things that just worked after being abandoned by others. Pilots laughed about her behind closed doors, across the hangar, boots scuffing, sunglasses glinting. Captain Ryan Cross, golden boy and ace pilot, leaned on a workbench with a smirk. Ghost Tech, in here again. Bet she fixed the hyperdrive while we were still arguing about coffee. He laughed, a loud, confident sound that echoed in the hangar. Others chuckled. Mara didn't respond, she never did. Mara moved through the base like a ghost, unnoticed until her work demanded acknowledgement, and even then it was fleeting. The janitors, the mechanics, even the pilots all treated her with a strange mixture of awe and indifference. She had learned to blend in, to disappear behind her hood, her silence, her quiet demeanor. Yet every step, every motion, spoke of discipline honed in circumstances none could imagine. By noon she was in the briefing room, tucked into a corner seat. The walls were lined with whiteboards, charts, and holographic displays depicting the airspace over Nevada. Pilots argued tactics, vectors, fuel consumption, evasive maneuvers. Mara listened, pen poised, occasionally jotting notes. Her eyes, sharp and calculating, darted across every map, every diagram, analyzing the smallest inconsistencies. While the room erupted in camaraderie, teasing, and competition, Mara's mind worked in silence, tracing patterns the pilots didn't even see. "You don't even fly," Captain Cross remarked loudly across the room, as if daring her to respond. "Ghost Tech here probably doesn't even like flying." Laughter followed. Mara didn't flinch. She closed her notebook slowly, the cover worn and creased, edges fraying as if it had weathered storms far beyond paper and ink. No one noticed the small metal ring on her finger, etched with a squadron insignia that wasn't supposed to exist. The insignia was almost invisible, scratched deep into the steel, faint but unmistakable to anyone who knew. Mara's eyes flicked down to it, a shadow of memory crossing her face. It was a memory of skis she'd conquered, of maneuvers executed with surgical precision, of enemies who had underestimated her and paid dearly. No one in the room could have guessed. The legend she had lived, the battles she had fought, the missions that had almost claimed her life, they had all vanished into classified files and erased radar images. Ghost Tech was a name born in silence and shadow. Wraith, her true call sign, was a ghost from another life, one the Air Force never acknowledged publicly. Outside, the desert wind kicked up, rattling the hangar doors. Mara felt it as more than just air. It carried echoes of the past, memories she had buried deep beneath her calm exterior. She had learned long ago that visibility meant vulnerability, and vulnerability could get a pilot killed. The soldiers in the briefing room, unaware of the storm that had forged her, continued their debates, oblivious to the tension she carried in her chest. Suddenly, the base intercom crackled to life. "Flight team, report to Bay 4 immediately. Systems anomaly detected." Mara's eyes sharpened. Her heartbeat remained calm, measured, almost inhuman. She grabbed her toolkit, moving faster than anyone could follow. As she reached the bay, she saw a line of jets sitting idle, their systems blinking erratically, warnings flashing like frantic Morse code. A rookie technician glanced at her, eyes wide. "Ma'am, this shouldn't even be possible." Mara crouched beside the first jet, her fingers dancing across touchscreens and switches, her mind reading code like a second language. The anomalies weren't random. They were deliberate, calculated, like a chess game with pieces moving invisible to everyone else. A subtle grin tugged at her lips. This wasn't failure. This was a test, and Mara Hale knew exactly who said it. She worked swiftly, isolating the problem, her hands moving in patterns that seemed almost ceremonial, precise, and elegant. The systems blinked and hesitated, as if uncertain who held control. Mara didn't speak, didn't announce her presence. She simply moved, and the problem unraveled beneath her fingertips. Within minutes, the jets hummed back to life, systems stabilizing across the board. The room filled with murmurs, awe, and confusion. Captain Cross appeared behind her, arms crossed. What just happened?" he stammered. Mara glanced up briefly, her calm, unreadable eyes meeting his. "Nothing you can't handle," she said softly. And then she turned and walked away, leaving him staring after her, a mix of frustration, admiration, and an unspoken question burning in his chest. No one else knew. The ghost tech in the hangar was still a myth, a silent savior whose work was always behind the scenes. But somewhere deep inside Mara, the ghosts of her past missions stirred. The planes she had flown, the enemies she had outwitted, the skis she had dominated, they whispered warnings she couldn't ignore. Because while the base saw an unassuming technician, someone else, someone dangerous, was watching, waiting for a sign that Wraith was still alive. Mara returned to her corner in the briefing room, hood pulled low. She opened her notebook again, scribbling calculations, strategies, and contingency plans no one would ever see. Outside, the desert heat rose, shimmering like the edge of an unseen battle. Shadows lengthened across the hangars, and for a brief moment, Mara allowed herself a thought she rarely entertained aloud. The past wasn't done with her. A faint vibration ran through the floor, a jet overhead, or perhaps something else. Mara froze, senses sharpening. The room was oblivious, but she felt it deep in her bones. Someone had just stepped into her sky, someone who knew her, someone who remembered Wraith. Her lips curved into the smallest, almost imperceptible smile. Ghost Tech had lived in shadows long enough. Soon, she would have to step into the light. But not yet. The room continued its chatter, pilots laughing, engineers muttering, oblivious to the storm brewing just beyond the horizon. Mara packed her notebook, tucked it carefully into her bag, and walked out. She melted into the corridors of Nelly's Air Force Base, unnoticed, almost untouchable. The name Ghost Tech was still a joke to most, but for Mara it was a mask. And somewhere high above the Nevada desert in the blackened sky, a pair of eyes were watching, waiting, calculating, recognizing. Because the world thought Ghost Tech was just a name. But Wraith never dies. And the first move had just been made. The night descended over Nelly's Air Force Base like a velvet curtain, the desert wind curling dust and sand into miniature storms that shimmered under the moonlight. Mara Hale stood in the dim glow of the hangar, leaning against the cold metal of an F-35. She had stayed late, finishing calibrations on avionics, her fingers stained with grease and circuits, her mind running through calculations she hadn't even shared in the briefing room. Then it started. A low, almost imperceptible alarm flickered through the base. The first pilot to report a problem was Lieutenant Davis, a seasoned flyer with years of experience, but even he sounded shaken when his voice came over the comm. "Command, systems failing, loss of HUD, controls delayed. I can't maintain flight." Static swallowed his words for a heartbeat, then silence. The flight deck froze. The digital board flashed a single, ominous notification: jet lost. Mara's pulse didn't quicken. Not yet. She already recognized the signature. A subtle, insidious interference, almost undetectable, a ghost in the system. Something deliberately engineered to destabilize the aircraft while making it appear like pilot error. By 02:17 hours, 3 more jets had reported similar anomalies. Panic started to ripple through the base. Command scrambled crews, technicians ran diagnostics, engineers pored over code, and pilots checked systems obsessively, shaking with disbelief. Each incident was more precise than the last, each failure designed to terrorize, to test, to humiliate. Captain Cross appeared in the hangar, sleeves rolled up, voice sharp but strained. "This isn't possible. Every system is clean. No software errors, no hardware faults. It's like the jets are fighting us." Mara stepped into the center of the chaos, quiet, focused, like a predator stepping into its territory. The comms channel buzzed incessantly with frantic voices, but she filtered it all out. Her eyes scanned the streams of data across the monitors, noticing patterns invisible to anyone else. A young engineer stepped toward her nervously. "Ma'am, I've never seen anything like this. The jets, every single one is showing lag patterns, but it's almost sentient. It's responding to the pilot's movements before they even make them." Mara didn't flinch. She knelt beside the nearest terminal, her fingers dancing across the keyboard with a fluid precision that seemed almost unnatural. The code unraveled beneath her like a silk thread, each line bending to her will. "This isn't random," she said, voice low, calm. "It's tactical." A pause fell over the hangar as technicians and pilots stared at her. Tactical. The word alone was enough to make seasoned operators swallow hard. Captain Cross stepped closer. "Tactical what? This isn't a known threat. These are our jets. How can a system be attacking us?" Mara looked at him, eyes cold, calculating. "Because someone designed it to anticipate your every move, and whoever it is knows exactly what you're capable of." Her words hung in the air, silence, then murmurs. Cross's jaw tightened. "Who the hell?" "Not who," Mara interrupted, standing slowly. "What?" She turned back to the terminal, isolating the anomalies with surgical precision. Each failing jet was a puzzle piece, each delay a hint. Within minutes, she had mapped the interference, traced the phantom inputs, and isolated the source to a microdelay exploit embedded deep in the avionics network. The exploit wasn't just digital, it was psychological. It played on instinct, creating micro-moments of doubt and hesitation that could kill in the sky. A young pilot swallowed audibly. That's impossible. Only someone who's flown these aircraft in combat could design something like this." Mara didn't answer. She ran simulations, watching the interference adapt, almost as if it recognized her. A shiver ran up her spine. She knew the signature instantly. She had encountered it once before, in a war zone nobody here had ever seen. The name Wraith flickered through her mind, the call sign she hadn't used in years. A call sign etched into enemy reports, feared and hated, thought dead. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Systems began to stabilize, alarms silenced, HUDs blinking back to life. Pilots exhaled in relief, their grips loosening, but Mara didn't allow herself the luxury of a sigh. She had seen too much to assume the threat was gone. "Alert," she said softly, almost to herself. "This isn't over." Captain Cross frowned, watching her. "What do you mean you fixed it? We're okay now." Mara shook her head. "Temporary. Whoever's behind this isn't attacking the aircraft, they're attacking confidence. They're learning us, studying us." Her gaze darkened. "And next time they won't give warning." A chill ran through the hangar. The young engineers exchanged nervous glances. Mara's calmness wasn't comforting, it was unsettling. She moved toward a large wall monitor, pulling up flight telemetry. Every anomaly, every sudden control lag, every pilot hesitation, it was all there, recorded in near-perfect detail. They've been observing our exercises for weeks, she said. Her voice was quiet, but each word hit like a hammer. Every maneuver, every response, every blind spot. Colonel Abrams appeared in the doorway, silhouetted by the desert moonlight. His usual composed demeanor was frayed. "Lieutenant Hale, what is this? How is this possible?" Mara's lips pressed into a thin line. "They know us, and they know me." Abrams blinked, confused. "You?" She turned, eyes locked on him, revealing nothing. "Not Ghost Tech, Wraith, the one you were told was dead, the one who disappeared over hostile territory with no trace." Abrams' face went pale. He'd heard the stories, read the reports, dismissed them as folklore, classified propaganda meant to motivate recruits. But standing before him, calm and commanding, was proof. Wraith was alive. Outside, the desert wind roared against the hangar walls. Somewhere in the blackened sky, a drone swept across the horizon, almost imperceptible, its sensors watching. Mara felt it, not with eyes but deep in her instincts. She hadn't flown in years, yet the battlefield's rhythm pulsed through her veins. Captain Cross stepped forward, incredulous. "You mean you've faced this before?" She nodded slightly, jaw tight. "And I know how it ends if we don't act carefully. If they want to push pilots into fatal errors, the first ones they test will die." The base's PA system screeched again, another jet off course. Alarms blared, lights strobing in red panic. Mara's eyes narrowed. "I need the cockpit," she said. Cross froze. You can't, you're." "I built these systems, I know every weakness." Her voice was steel. "Send me up or people die." Abrams stepped forward, understanding dawning, though fear crept into his voice. "Do what you must, but be careful. This isn't just a test." Mara didn't hesitate. She moved toward the launch bay, every step measured, her mind racing faster than any jet could carry her. Pilots cleared the runway, technicians scrambled, the hum of jet engines filling the air like the heartbeat of the desert itself. As Mara climbed into the cockpit, she allowed herself a fraction of a grin. The sky had called her back, and she intended to answer, but someone else in the shadows had already noticed. They were waiting, and they knew Wraith was awake. The engines roared, her visor reflecting the pale moonlight. She checked her HUD, systems flickering with the subtle anomalies she had isolated and neutralized. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly, a canvas for the coming battle. She adjusted the throttle, hands steady, heart disciplined. The base watched in silence as the jet lifted, slicing through the desert darkness like a phantom streak of silver. Mara felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the flow of anticipation and danger that only a pilot in combat could recognize. And somewhere far above, unseen, a predator mirrored her movements, analyzing, calculating, waiting. Mara's voice crackled over comms, calm but charged with authority. "This isn't a malfunction. This is deliberate, and I intend to find out who sent it." Silence answered her, then a new alarm. Another jet went dark. Mara tightened her grip. The night was far from over. Because Ghost Tech had solved the first puzzle. But Wraith was about to step fully into the fight. And the enemy knew she was awake. The conference room was cold, sterile, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights that made every shadow sharp and unforgiving. Colonel Abrams leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, his usual stoicism shaken by a mixture of disbelief and concern. He had summoned Mara Hale into this private room immediately after the night's events. Outside, the base hummed with activity, alarms still echoing faintly from the hangar. Pilots, engineers, and technicians whispered in corridors, the stories of malfunction jets already spreading like wildfire. Abrams held a folder in his hand, its cover heavy with the weight of classification. He flipped it open slowly as though the contents could somehow bite him. The papers inside were redacted, some almost illegible satellite images smudged, timestamps blacked out. A chill ran down Mara's spine, not from fear but from memory. She recognized those images immediately. Ghost missions. Unacknowledged flights. Operations erased from history. This doesn't make sense, Abrams muttered, scanning the pages. Your official record, it starts 5 years ago. No flight hours. No combat experience. Nothing that would qualify you to handle the events from tonight. Mara stood at attention, silent, expression unreadable. Inside, a storm of memories raged. Missions that had cost friends, enemies who had thought her dead, skis where survival wasn't guaranteed. Her calm exterior was a mask honed over years of living as both legend and ghost. Abraham's finger traced a blacked-out line in the folder. All of this, none of it exists in our records. It's as if you never flew, except, his voice faltered, except for this, Wraith. Mara's eyes flickered ever so slightly. One name, one call sign, and the past threatened to crack her composed facade. Wraith. It was a name whispered among enemy intelligence circles, a phantom pilot no one could catch, feared, revered, and officially declared dead. No wreckage, no body, only rumors that haunted the skis of hostile territories and haunted the classified archives of the U.S. Air Force. Only one pilot ever flew like this, Abrams continued, voice low, all creeping into disbelief. Perfect evasions, impossible survivability. They thought you were a glitch in the radar, not a human being. No one should have survived the missions attributed to you. Mara's jaw tightened. Memories surged. Jet engines screaming in hostile airspace, missiles arcing toward her, systems failing mid-combat, the panic of crew members, friends she couldn't save. She had walked away physically intact, but the mental scars were etched into her like radar burns on her mind. They thought I was dead because they needed me to be, she said finally. Because legends make enemies, and enemies don't stop hunting. Abrams leaned back, rubbing his temples. Why disappear? You were one of the best we ever had. Why vanish? Mara's gaze shifted to the floor, then slowly returned to meet his eyes. Because surviving made me a target. Because if they knew I was alive, they would have come for me. And coming for me doesn't just mean risking a jet or a mission. It means risking lives. My lives. Other lives. People you care about. The room was quiet except for the low hum of air conditioning and distant bass chatter. Then, without warning, alarms wailed again, shrill, piercing, shaking the walls. Another jet had gone off course, systems failing simultaneously. The timing was precise, deliberate. Abrams' face turned grave. They're testing you again. Mara didn't flinch. Her pulse remained steady. She had flown this game before, under circumstances far deadlier than this. She approached the nearest console, her gloved fingers tracing sequences she had memorized years ago in classified operations. Every line of code, every system protocol, it spoke to her in the language of survival. They're not attacking the aircraft, she murmured, almost to herself. They're probing, they're learning, and they know me. Abrams froze. You mean you've faced this kind of digital warfare before? Mara nodded slightly. In hostile skis, on missions no one here was ever supposed to know about. I was trained for this. The difference is back then I was invisible because I had to be. Tonight the game is changing. Her fingers moved with the precision of someone who had saved their life hundreds of times in split-second decisions, running simulations faster than anyone else could think. Alarms blinked, systems stabilized, then faltered again, testing the limits of her adjustments. Mara's calm, collected demeanor was the eye of the storm, a stark contrast to the chaos surrounding her. Abrams finally spoke, voice tight. Why didn't we know? Your missions, your achievements, they were classified beyond belief. But no one thought, no one imagined you'd be here, that this, Wraith, was alive. Mara exhaled softly. They didn't want you to know. Not then, not ever. It's easier to train pilots to follow protocol than to risk them fearing a ghost. Abrams swallowed, trying to comprehend the magnitude. So, all these years you've been what? Watching, waiting. Yes, she admitted. Her voice was calm, but there was steel beneath the syllables. Watching, waiting, And now the past has found me, and so has the enemy. Abram stiffened. Enemy, you mean? Someone who remembers Wraith, Mara cut in. Someone who knows what I can do. Someone who won't give warnings anymore. Outside, the desert night seemed to press against the windows. The wind howled like a warning, rattling the building. Somewhere in the distance, a jet screamed overhead, off course. Mara's instincts sharpened. Her body recognized the rhythm, the cadence of flight that only a combat pilot could feel, even when grounded. I need the cockpit, she said, voice low but commanding. If we're going to contain this, if we're going to protect pilots tonight, I need to fly. Abrams hesitated. Lieutenant, you're not rated for. I'm rated for what they're testing, Mara interrupted. I built these systems. I know every weakness, every exploit. Send me up or someone dies. The colonel's eyes narrowed, a flicker of respect and fear passing through them. He knew instinctively that she wasn't bluffing. Do it, but Mara, be careful. This isn't a simulation. Her expression didn't change. Calm, unreadable, trained. But deep down, a storm surged, memories of battle, adrenaline, and the thrill of survival, the reason she had survived when so many others hadn't. She packed the necessary gear with meticulous speed, moving like a machine but thinking like a predator. Every step carried the weight of past missions and the urgency of the present. As she approached the hangar, Mara's mind replayed images she rarely allowed herself to see. Jets twisting through hostile skis, enemy radar locks, missiles arcing like lethal comets, the screams of engines and her own heart pounding in synchrony. She had lived through impossible situations, emerged victorious where others had failed. But tonight the challenge was different. It wasn't over foreign skis. It was here, among allies, testing the limits of trust, technology, and nerves. Captain Cross appeared, expression a mixture of disbelief and awe. Mara, if anyone can stop this, it's you. But you're a ghost. Wraith. No one knows what you're capable of. She didn't answer. She merely climbed into the jet, visor down, helmet securing, hands steady on controls that seemed almost like extensions of her body. The engines roared to life beneath her, vibrations humming through the frame, a familiar song of controlled power. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly under moonlight. Stars reflected on polished metal, the night sky a canvas for the inevitable confrontation. Mara exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline. She wasn't just ghost tech tonight, she was Wraith. And the world, the base, the enemy, they were about to remember why that name had inspired fear. As she taxied down the runway, her comms buzzed with anxious voices of pilots and technicians. Mara's grip tightened on the controls. The first jet had already gone dark again, its signal lost in the night sky. Time was short. Precision was everything. Her mind, sharp as ever, calculated vectors, speeds, and contingencies. Every instinct honed from countless missions told her that someone, or something, was observing, anticipating, and testing her. The enemy had learned much, but they hadn't counted on one thing: she was still alive. She remembered. She was Wraith. The runway stretched before her like a tunnel of opportunity. Mara pushed the throttle, engines screaming, lifting into the night sky with the grace and authority of a pilot who had survived death countless times. The base watched silently as the Phantom jet ascended, a streak of silver against the black canvas of the Nevada desert. And somewhere far beyond the horizon, in shadows she couldn't yet see, the enemy realized the first move had been answered. Because the ghost they thought was gone had returned. And this time, the sky itself would bear witness. The sun had barely risen over Nellie's Air Force Base, spilling pale gold across the hangars, when Mara Hale approached the F-35s lined up on the tarmac. Dust swirled around her boots as if the desert itself was holding its breath. Today, Ghost Tech would do more than tinker with systems. Today, she would reclaim the sky she had once ruled under a different name: Wraith. Mechanics and pilots froze as she walked past them. Her hood was down, revealing sharp features hardened by years of survival and combat. Every eye in the hangar tracked her movement, some with disbelief, some with awe and a few with quiet fear. Captain Ryan Cross stepped forward, his usual swagger replaced by tension. "You're not rated for these jets," he said. "You'll get yourself killed." Mara's eyes met his, calm, unwavering. "I built the systems that control their limits. I know their weaknesses better than anyone else here. Let me handle this or someone else dies." A tense silence fell over the hangar. Cross exhaled slowly, running a hand through his hair. You're insane, but fine, just come back in one piece." Mara didn't reply. She climbed into the cockpit like a shadow slipping into its natural element. The seat seemed to embrace her, controls perfectly positioned, familiar, as if they had been waiting for her touch. The helmet secured, visor reflecting the desert sun, and with a deep inhale she activated the engines. The jet roared to life, a powerful beast beneath her, vibrating with energy and raw potential. Every wire, every circuit, every microchip responded as if they recognized their master. Sensors lit up, HUD flickering briefly, then stabilizing under her command. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, a blank canvas for the confrontation that had been building for months. As she taxied down the runway, technicians scrambled to their consoles, monitoring the other aircraft. Alarms flared sporadically, remnants of the digital sabotage from the night before. Pilots gripped controls tightly, eyes wide. Mara exhaled slowly, her mind running through every possible contingency, calculating every movement, every threat vector. Then the jet lifted. Smoothly, effortlessly. Mara pushed it past initial altitude checks, engines screaming, the desert wind whipping across the tarmac. Dust exploded behind the jet as it gained speed, becoming a silver streak against the pale morning sky. The interference returned almost immediately, phantom inputs, system lags, subtle control resistance. But Mara didn't flinch. Her fingers danced over switches and touchscreens with practiced precision, compensating for each anomaly before it could even affect the flight. She had faced this before in hostile skis, against enemies trained to anticipate every move. This was familiar. A voice crackled over the comm, tense. "Ma'am, we're seeing the same interference across the fleet. It's spreading fast." Mara's jaw tightened. "I know." She toggled several override systems, rerouting power, isolating anomalies. The jets responded immediately. Alarms ceased, HUDs blinked back to life. She could feel the digital presence probing her, testing her reactions, trying to learn her patterns, almost like a predator circling its prey. "Target identified," she whispered under her breath, eyes narrowing as radar flickered, revealing the source of the anomaly. A shadowy, unmarked jet mirroring maneuvers across the Nevada sky. Someone was watching and waiting. Captain Cross watched from below, hands on his head, jaw slack. "I can't, that jet isn't real. It's how is she?" Mara didn't answer. She executed a sharp climb, pulling the aircraft up at a near-impossible angle, breaking the pattern of the phantom jet. It followed, mimicking her movements, a deadly dance she had done before countless times over enemy skis. Her instincts took over, Wraith was back. The desert stretched below, mountains cutting jagged lines against the horizon. Mara's jet twisted, rolled, and banked at speeds that would have disoriented most pilots. She dodged phantom attacks, executed maneuvers that seemed to defy physics, each one calculated to destabilize the enemy without risking her aircraft. She was no longer just a technician. She was a predator in the sky, a ghost whose legend was whispered in fear by enemies who had once thought her dead. A sudden flare appeared in the distance, simulated missile fire or real. Mara didn't have time to think. She reacted instinctively, pulling the jet into a near-vertical climb, letting the missile's trajectory pass harmlessly beneath her. The ground trembled in the hangar as her maneuvers echoed through the air. Pilots below held their breath, technicians muttered in disbelief, and Captain Cross watched, transfixed, realizing that Ghost Tech was no longer a shadow. She was dominance incarnate. Minutes stretched into eternity as she led the chase, anticipating every move the unmarked jet made. It was almost playful in its precision, yet deadly. Mara allowed herself a small grin. This wasn't just a fight, it was a test, one she intended to win. Then without warning, the shadow jet tried a move she had never seen before. It twisted violently, a near-impossible corkscrew aimed directly at her trajectory. Mara's heart raced, adrenaline spiking, but her hands were steady. She anticipated the vector, adjusted the flight path, and used the enemy's momentum against it. The unmarked jet faltered, systems glitching, unable to predict her next move. "Got you," she whispered, voice barely audible over the roar of her engines. On the ground, alarms sounded again as multiple jets stabilized across the fleet. Engineers and technicians stared at their consoles, astonishment and relief flooding their expressions. Captain Cross muttered under his breath, eyes wide. I don't believe it. She did it. She really did it." Mara didn't celebrate. She had neutralized the immediate threat, but she knew the fight wasn't over. Someone, or something, was still out there. Someone who remembered Wraith, who had crafted this digital ambush with surgical precision. The enemy had underestimated her once. They would not make that mistake again. She leveled her jet, scanning the horizon. The unmarked aircraft had vanished, leaving only a faint trace on radar. Mara exhaled slowly, relief and tension mingling. This was a victory, but it was only the first in a series of tests she knew were coming. As she descended back toward the base, the desert stretched below like a map of possibilities. Safe zones, potential threats, unknown variables. Mara's mind raced through calculations, contingency plans, and tactics. Every maneuver she executed had been deliberate, precise, a reminder that she was more than ghost tech. She was Wraith. Touching down on the runway, she brought the jet to a smooth halt. Engines cooled, vibrations subsided, and the desert silence returned. The hangar doors opened, crews rushing forward, voices shouting in awe and relief. Captain Cross approached, shaking his head. I don't even know what to call that." Mara's helmet reflected the early morning sun. She removed it slowly, revealing a calm, composed expression. "Call it survival," she said simply. Abrams appeared behind Cross, expression taut but relieved. "You've done more than save the fleet tonight," he said. "You've reminded us all why legends like you exist." Mara didn't answer. She surveyed the desert horizon, scanning for any lingering threats. Somewhere far above, beyond radar, eyes watched her, calculating. The enemy had tested the base and underestimated her. Now they knew Wraith was awake, and the consequences would be swift and deliberate. The base was buzzing with awe and confusion. Technicians checking consoles, pilots debriefing in whispers, and Cross still staring at her with disbelief. Mara walked away from the jet, calm, methodical, a ghost returning to the shadows after leaving her mark. She knew the day wasn't over. The interference had been halted, but the message was clear. The enemy was out there, and they were waiting. Mara exhaled, letting the adrenaline ebb slightly. For a moment she allowed herself a thought she rarely entertained, anticipation, not fear. The skis had called her back and she had answered, but this was only the beginning. Somewhere beyond the horizon, someone was taking notes, someone was learning, and Wraith would be ready. Because legends aren't just remembered, they're feared. And the next move in this deadly game would come at lightning speed. Mara's eyes narrowed as she walked back into the hangar. Ghost Tech had taken the cockpit, and for the first time in years, the world knew she wasn't just a name whispered in rumor. She was alive. She was Wraith, and she was coming for anyone who thought they could challenge her again. The desert wind stirred around her, carrying the faintest hint of danger. Somewhere high above, the game had just begun. Night had fallen over Nellie's Air Force Base again, wrapping the desert in darkness and a chilling sense of anticipation. Mara Hale sat alone in the corner of a dimly lit hangar, the glow from console screens casting angular shadows across her face. The jet she had stabilized hours ago now rested silently on the tarmac, but she knew the calm was deceptive. The digital ambush wasn't just a test anymore, it was a warning. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, tracing invisible patterns in the data streams. Every system she touched, every anomaly she isolated, every phantom input she neutralized. It all told a story she had lived before, one only Wraith could read. Then the encrypted message arrived. It appeared on a secure channel, stripped of sender information. No greetings, no signatures, only 4 words. Wraith confirmed active. The screen pulsed in the dark, reflecting faintly in Mara's visor. She exhaled slowly, letting the weight of those words settle. They were not a warning to the base. They were a message to her, personal, direct, and chilling. "They always do this," she murmured under her breath, fingers tapping lightly against the console. "Announce the hunt." Colonel Abrams, who had been silently observing from the doorway, leaned closer. "The hunt? Mara, who's doing this? Who would?" "They know me," Mara said, voice calm, but the words carried steel. "Not Ghost Tech Wraith. Whoever's behind this isn't after the fleet. They're after me." Abrams' face paled. "After you, Mara, you're part of this base now. You're supposed to protect them." She didn't look at him. Instead, her eyes scanned the dark horizon visible through the hangar doors. Somewhere in the sky, beyond radar, a predator was watching. Someone who remembered every mission, every maneuver, every kill. Someone who had failed to destroy her once and now wanted to correct that mistake. "Who is it?" Abrams pressed. Mara finally turned, her gaze sharp, unwavering. "I don't know yet, but they're good. Better than anyone I've faced since the missions I left behind." Her hands moved over the keyboard, isolating anomalies, cross-referencing flight paths, triangulating signals. The data revealed small hints, unmarked drones, slight microjamming in specific zones, interference patterns designed to mimic pilot error. Whoever this was, they were professional, calculated, and ruthless. Captain Cross entered the hangar quietly, his expression a mixture of awe and apprehension. "They're after you, huh?" he asked, voice low. "Not the base, not the jets, you." Mara nodded. "Exactly, and that makes this personal. If they succeed, they don't just take me, they destabilize everything the base depends on." Abrams' jaw tightened. "So what's the plan? We can't just sit here." "I'm going to draw them out," Mara said. Her voice was firm, unwavering. "If they want Wraith, they'll come for me, and I intend to meet them in the only way they understand." Cross frowned. "You're going up alone." Mara's eyes narrowed. "I don't need anyone else. This isn't a team exercise. This is a hunt, and the prey needs the advantage of experience." Abrams hesitated, but knew arguing was futile. Wraith had always been unpredictable and unmatched. He finally said, "Do it. But Mara, if you don't come back, this base, it'll—" "I'll come back," she interrupted, voice calm, almost serene. But inside, her mind raced through calculations, recalling every past mission, every enemy she had ever faced. The hunts she survived were lessons in instinct, precision, and survival. Tonight she would need all 3 and more. By 02:00 hours, Mara was in the cockpit of an F-35, engines humming, systems alive beneath her fingertips. She activated every sensor, every countermeasure, every override. The base watched tensely from below, radar operators tracking phantom anomalies still flickering across the airspace. Mara's eyes scanned the horizon. Somewhere in the blackness above, the enemy waited. The first contact came suddenly. A dark blip on radar, no markings, almost invisible. It moved with deliberate precision, mirroring her maneuvers in a silent, deadly dance. Mara's pulse remained steady, hands firm on the controls. She remembered this instinctively, the twists, the climbs, the evasions. She had done this countless times before, under fire, alone in hostile skis, when survival was the only objective. "Target acquired," she whispered, voice low, almost reverent. The unmarked aircraft accelerated, testing her reaction time, probing for weaknesses. Mara responded with maneuvers that seemed impossible, pushing the jet beyond theoretical limits. The shadow jet faltered for a fraction of a second, a heartbeat enough to reveal its strategy. "This isn't just a test," she said quietly, lips pressed tight. "They want to see if I'm still Wraith." Suddenly, the enemy jet broke formation, executing a move she hadn't anticipated, a near-vertical dive, engines screaming like a predator attacking prey. Mara reacted instinctively, pulling into a sharp roll, narrowly avoiding collision. She felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, that precise moment when instinct overrides thought, when skill and fear merge into clarity. Somewhere far below, the base watched, silent, technicians gripping consoles, pilots holding their breath. Captain Cross muttered under his breath, awe and disbelief etched across his face. "I can't, she's impossible." Mara kept her focus. This wasn't about proving herself to the base. This was about survival and sending a message. Whoever was behind the attacks had underestimated her once. They wouldn't again. She had survived impossible situations before, faced enemies who were supposed to destroy her. Tonight, she would do it again. The enemy jet fired a missile, a silent streak of fire in the dark sky. Mara executed a precise vertical climb, letting the missile arc harmlessly beneath her. She twisted, rolled, banking sharply, and suddenly the unmarked jet faltered, unable to predict her next move. Mara's eyes narrowed as she calculated her counterstrike, targeting the digital signature of the interference embedded in its systems. "You want Wraith," she whispered, voice icy. "You've got her." The enemy jet vanished into the night, leaving a faint trace on radar. Mara leveled her aircraft, engines humming steadily. The desert stretched below like a canvas of possibilities and threats. She knew the fight wasn't over. Someone had orchestrated this attack with meticulous precision, and now they had witnessed her response. They knew she was alive, fully alert, fully capable. Touching down on the tarmac, Mara brought the jet to a smooth halt, the engines cooling in a steady hum. The hangar doors opened, crews rushing forward, voices shouting in awe and relief. Captain Cross approached, still shaking his head. That was unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it." Mara removed her helmet slowly, visor reflecting the dim glow of the hangar. Her expression remained calm, collected, unreadable. "It's not over," she said simply. "They know I'm awake now, and the hunt will continue." Abrams appeared behind Cross, his face taut with tension and relief. "You've done more than save the fleet tonight," he said. "You've sent a message to anyone who thought Wraith was gone." Mara exhaled slowly, letting the adrenaline ebb slightly. Somewhere in the darkness above, eyes were watching, calculating the next move. She had neutralized the immediate threat, but she knew it wasn't the last encounter. The enemy had remembered her name, and now the game was personal. She walked away from the jet, calm, methodical, a ghost leaving its mark on the battlefield. The base buzzed with awe, technicians checking consoles, pilots debriefing in hushed whispers. Captain Cross followed silently. He had seen legends before, but never like this. Mara paused at the edge of the hangar, glancing at the horizon. Somewhere beyond radar, beyond sight, her enemy waited. The message had been delivered. Wraith was awake, and the predator in the sky would be ready for them. As she disappeared into the shadows of the hangar, the desert wind stirred, carrying a hint of danger, anticipation, and inevitability. The night had tested her. She had prevailed. But the enemy was still out there, and they would come again. Mara Hale, Ghost Tech Wraith, smiled faintly to herself. Legends weren't just remembered, they were feared. And the next move in this deadly game would come faster than anyone expected. The night was far from over. The Nevada desert lay under a cloak of stars, the night sky wide and infinite, broken only by the occasional flicker of radar blips and distant lights on the base. Mara Hale climbed into the cockpit of her F-35 with deliberate calm, fingers brushing over the familiar controls. Every button, switch, and sensor was an extension of her will. Tonight, the game would no longer be digital manipulation or phantom threats. Tonight, she would face her adversary head-on. A sudden ping on her HUD revealed the signature, unmarked, precise, and eerily familiar. The enemy was out there, shadowing her movements, their jet twisting and weaving through the night like a predator stalking prey. Mara didn't hesitate. Her instincts, honed through years of combat missions long classified, kicked in instantly. "They've waited for this," she muttered, voice low, "and I've been waiting too." Captain Cross, watching from the command tower below, muttered under his breath, "I can't believe this. She's going up against, whatever that is, alone." Mara throttled forward, her jet responding like a living creature. The desert below became a blur, jagged shadows of mountains and ridges twisting beneath her. She felt every vibration, every pressure change, every subtle shift in the air, like a sixth sense. She had flown these skis in a previous life, over enemy territories where survival depended on instinct and split-second decisions. The unmarked jet appeared suddenly, cutting across her trajectory like a phantom slash. Mara banked sharply, feeling the G-forces press against her body, visor reflecting streaks of moonlight as she rolled into a near-impossible corkscrew maneuver. The enemy matched her movement, almost predictively. "Professional," she murmured, eyes narrowing. "Too professional to be anyone local, someone who knows me." The first missiles came, a streak of deadly fire screaming across the night sky. Mara executed a vertical climb, the engines roaring, twisting, and rolling at angles most pilots wouldn't survive. The missile passed harmlessly beneath her. The Shadow jet executed the same move, a mirror reflecting skill and intent. The base below watched tensely. Engineers and pilots followed the radar, whispering as systems flashed alerts, unable to comprehend the aerial ballet unfolding hundreds of feet above the desert floor. Mara's voice over the comm was calm, steady, confident. "They're good, very good, but I've been here before." She dove, twisting and banking in fluid movements, drawing on muscle memory from a lifetime of combat. Every maneuver calculated to test, bait, and trap. The enemy jet mirrored her actions with precision, testing for weakness, trying to anticipate her next move. Mara's hands moved instinctively, adjusting the controls faster than thought, feeding on adrenaline, focus, and years of training that few could rival. Then came the feint, a sudden roll and break toward the horizon. Mara hesitated for barely a heartbeat, then executed a reverse maneuver, exploiting a micro-misalignment in the enemy's formation. The unmarked jet wavered, systems momentarily destabilized by the subtle tactic. Mara's lips curved into a faint, grim smile. "Got you," she whispered under her breath. The unmarked jet immediately corrected, executing a vertical climb and dive, a maneuver she hadn't anticipated. Mara adjusted in a heartbeat, G-forces pressing hard, vision narrowing to HUD displays and radar blips. She recognized the signature, the precise timing, the aggressive, controlled unpredictability. Whoever this was, they had faced her before, perhaps trained to anticipate every instinct she had developed. Her mind raced, analyzing, calculating. She realized the fight was no longer just aerial, it was psychological. Every maneuver tested her reaction, every attack measured her confidence, every feint assessed her patience. Mara felt the rush, the edge of survival, as if the desert itself held its breath alongside her. Missiles streaked again, this time more numerous, a volley designed to overwhelm. Mara executed a vertical barrel roll, twisting sharply, letting the missiles arc harmlessly past. Then she banked, diving toward the jagged desert ridges, using terrain to mask her movements, forcing the enemy to adjust and reveal their vector. Somewhere in the shadows, the unmarked jet faltered slightly, giving Mara the opening she needed. She accelerated, closing the distance, targeting digital signature vulnerabilities she had identified. The enemy responded instantly, evasive maneuvers flashing across radar. "Impressive," she muttered, "but not enough." The dogfight stretched for what felt like hours but was barely minutes. Jets twisted, flipped, climbed, and dove, painting the night sky with arcs of motion, flares, and turbulence. Mara executed maneuvers that defied expectation, drawing on instincts honed in life-and-death battles far removed from this base. The enemy adapted quickly, but each adjustment revealed subtle weaknesses Mara had anticipated. Then suddenly, the unmarked jet broke formation aggressively, aiming directly at her trajectory. Mara's body tensed, G-forces pressing, heart steady. She executed a split-S maneuver, reversing her trajectory mid-air, engines screaming, narrowly avoiding collision. The shadow jet overcorrected, losing microseconds that could be fatal. Below, the base erupted in tension. Captain Cross whispered almost reverently, "She's untouchable." Mara leveled her aircraft, eyes narrowing, systems scanning relentlessly. The enemy jet had made its move, exposed its intention. Now she could respond. She executed a series of precise micromaneuvers, isolating the jet's digital signature, feeding false telemetry into its system, destabilizing its controls ever so slightly. The unmarked jet shuddered mid-air, radar flickering, system spiking. Mara didn't hesitate. She closed the distance, matching the enemy's speed and altitude, wings slicing through the air like knives. A calculated spike of countermeasures forced the shadow jet into evasive action, giving her a clear line of sight. She whispered under her breath, almost casually, "Time to finish this." The enemy jet veered, then vanished momentarily, a brief disappearance that suggested stealth systems or electronic countermeasures. Mara's fingers flew over switches and controls, compensating for interference, predicting trajectories. Her mind worked faster than the speed of thought, reconstructing the enemy's vector from fragments of radar blips, subtle air pressure changes, and faint thermal traces. Suddenly, the shadow jet reappeared directly ahead, engines screaming, flares blazing. Mara executed a sharp climb, pulling just enough G-force to avoid an almost perfect missile lock. The enemy faltered slightly, revealing its position just enough for a calculated strike, but Mara didn't fire. Not yet. She wanted to test them, draw out the real skill, confirm the predator she was facing. The jet twirled, dove, and twisted in a deadly ballet. Mara mirrored the movements with flawless precision, but she could feel it. This enemy wasn't ordinary. They anticipated her patterns, reacted almost instinctively. And yet, for every skill they displayed, Mara had an answer, a counter, a maneuver no one could predict. High above in the black sky, the dogfight unfolded like a cinematic storm, a battle of skill, instinct, and wills. The desert below was silent, a witness to the lethal grace of two forces locked in deadly rhythm. Mara felt the surge of adrenaline, the thrill of combat, the intoxicating mix of fear and focus that defined every mission she had survived. Then, in a sudden, almost imperceptible moment, the enemy made a critical miscalculation. Mara exploited it instantly, forcing the shadow jet into a vertical stall. Its engines screamed, control surfaces spiking violently. Mara rolled past, wings slicing cleanly as the enemy struggled to regain stability. "Gotcha," she whispered, a grim smile on her lips. The unmarked jet corrected, systems stabilizing, but Mara knew the predator had been revealed. Whoever this was, they now understood they were facing Wraith herself. Not Ghost Tech, not a technician, but the legendary fighter pilot whose name had haunted enemy intelligence for years. Touching down on the base runway, engines cooling, Mara's jet vibrated under her grip. The hangar doors opened, crews rushing forward, but she didn't look back. She had won this encounter, but the fight was far from over. Somewhere in the darkness, someone was watching, calculating the next move. They had learned tonight that Wraith was awake, alive, and unmatched. And Mara Hale, Ghost Tech, smiled faintly beneath her visor. The dogfight had been seen by no one but the desert, the stars, and the enemy themselves. And the next battle would come faster, deadlier, and more personal. The legend had returned, and the sky itself would remember her name. The desert was silent in the early hours, moonlight casting long shadows over Nellis Air Force Base. Mara Hale sat alone in the operations room, screens flickering with telemetry, radar blips, and the faint traces of the shadow jet she had bested the night before. But her victory had come at a price. Questions that clawed at her like sharp talons, each one demanding an answer she hadn't wanted to face. Colonel Abrams leaned against the doorway, his expression tense, exhausted from sleepless hours. "Mara, it's time," he said softly. "You need to know who's behind this." Mara's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her mind racing through calculations, projections, possibilities. Every scenario she had anticipated, every contingency she had prepared. It was all necessary, but now the uncertainty gnawed at her. "Show me," she said simply. Abrams gestured to a secure console. The screen lit up with a single encrypted feed, satellite surveillance, intercepted communications, and a composite of digital fingerprints. Mara's eyes scanned the data, moving faster than the human eye could track. Then it hit her. The signature was unmistakable. The precision, the timing, the knowledge of her maneuvers. This wasn't just any hacker, any mercenary, any enemy pilot. This was someone who had lived in the same skis, faced the same life-and-death calculations, someone who knew the rhythm of her instincts. Her lips parted slightly. It can't be." Abrams didn't respond. He let her analyze the data, knowing the shock would hit her harder than any briefing or explanation. Mara leaned closer to the screen. The silhouette of the enemy pilot appeared in a reconnaissance image, a tall figure, helmet reflecting the same desert moonlight she had flown under countless nights ago. The insignias on the flight suit, the posture, even the micro-adjustments of the pilot's hands, it was someone she knew intimately. "Mara," Abrams asked gently, sensing her hesitation. Her hands clenched into fists. "It's him," she whispered, barely audible. "It's Carter Vale." Abrams' eyes widened. Carter, the pilot they said was lost, Wraith's partner. Mara nodded slowly, memories flooding back. Vale had been more than a colleague. He had been her co-pilot, her closest friend, the only person who had matched her skill and instinct in every mission. They had flown together on unacknowledged operations, surviving situations that would have killed anyone else. And then he had vanished, declared dead, sacrificed, or so she had been told. But now, staring at the screen, she realized the truth. He hadn't died. He had survived. And for reasons she could not yet understand, he had turned against her. Abrams swallowed hard. Why would he do this? Carter was one of the best, loyal. They said he died in hostile territory. Mara's eyes were cold, calculating, but the betrayal burned inside her. "Because he blames me," she said, voice low, dangerous. "For what happened on Operation Black Falcon." Her mind raced back to that night. The mission that had gone wrong, the ambush they had survived, the decisions that had cost lives. Vale had always followed her lead, trusted her implicitly. But something had changed. Something had festered in the years they were presumed dead. A chill ran through the operations room. Mara's instincts told her that Vale wasn't just skilled, he was personal. Every maneuver, every interference, every challenge tonight had been crafted to test her, to bait her, and to confront her with the past she could not escape. Cross stepped closer, voice tense. "Mara, if it's him, what do we do? How do we stop him?" She turned to him, eyes steely. "We don't stop him with numbers or radar. We stop him with experience, with skill, with instinct. I know him, Cross. I know how he thinks, how he moves, how he anticipates. And I know he underestimates me, because he thinks the girl who disappeared isn't the woman he once knew." Abrams frowned. "But he's dangerous, more dangerous than anyone you've faced before." Mara exhaled slowly. "I know, and that's why this will be personal. If he wants to test Wraith, I'll give him exactly what he's looking for, but I won't lose again." The screens flickered and new data appeared, a live feed from one of the drones monitoring the desert. Mara leaned closer. The image showed Vale's jet hovering just beyond radar detection, engines idling, waiting, watching. He had come prepared, anticipating her every move, orchestrating events like a chess master with a grudge. Her hands flew over the console, running simulations. Each move he had made tonight, the digital sabotage, the shadow maneuvers, the phantom attacks, they all pointed to one conclusion: Vale knew her better than anyone. But she had learned to anticipate the unpredictable. She had survived impossible situations before, against impossible odds, and she would survive this. "Carter Vale," she whispered, voice trembling slightly with suppressed anger. "You want me, huh? You want Wraith? You're going to get her." Abrams and Cross watched in tense silence as Mara executed a series of calculations, planning intercepts, countermeasures, and strategies. She traced his likely path through the desert sky, predicting maneuvers that only someone with intimate knowledge of his instincts could anticipate. Mara's pulse raced, adrenaline surging, but her mind remained focused. This wasn't just a fight, it was closure, a confrontation with the past she had buried for years. She had thought Vale dead, a casualty of war and circumstance. But now he was alive, and he had returned to challenge her. A sudden alert on the console drew her attention, an anomaly forming near the base perimeter. Vale had moved, closing the distance faster than she had predicted. Mara's heart tightened. The dogfight she had avoided in simulations was about to become real. "Brace yourself," she murmured, voice barely audible. "This is it, the fight no one was meant to see." Abrams placed a hand on her shoulder. "Be careful, Mara, he's not just a ghost, he's deadly," she finished for him. Her eyes were fixed on the horizon, on the faint streak of moonlight reflecting off the enemy jet. She could feel him thinking ahead, predicting her response, testing her reflexes even now. But she had a secret he didn't anticipate. She had grown stronger, faster, and smarter since he last saw her. Wraith was awake. The desert stretched endlessly, silent and vast, as if holding its breath. Mara climbed into the cockpit fully, visor down, engines humming to life. Every calculation, every instinct, every ounce of skill honed over years of combat would be put to the ultimate test. Somewhere above, Carter Vale waited, confident, dangerous, his jet a phantom in the night sky. And Mara, Ghost Tech Wraith, was ready to face him, not as a partner, not as a colleague, not as a girl he once knew, but as the legend who had survived impossible odds and who would not be bested by the ghosts of the past. Her fingers tightened on the controls, eyes scanning the radar, mind racing faster than thought. The confrontation was imminent. The revelation had shattered everything she believed about her past, her friend, and the man she had once trusted implicitly. But one thing remained crystal clear: she would not falter. Wraith was back, and the night sky was about to witness a battle no one would forget. The legend and the ghost faced each other, and the desert held its breath. The desert night was alive with electricity, the tension palpable even from the ground. Mara Hale sat in the cockpit of her F-35, visor down, hands steady on the controls, her every muscle taut with anticipation. Above the Nevada expanse, Carter Vale's shadow jet hovered in the darkness, a spectral predator stalking her movements. The wind had died to a near silence, leaving only the hum of engines, the faint flicker of radar, and the heartbeat of two legends about to collide. For a moment, Mara allowed herself a breath, her mind racing through every memory of Vale, the shared missions, the split-second rescues, the nights when the sky had been theirs alone. And then she remembered the betrayal, the disappearance, the ghost he had become. Every instinct screamed at her. This fight wasn't just skill, it was personal. She pushed the throttle forward, engines roaring, and surged into the open sky. Vale mirrored her movement, a deadly reflection, precise, controlled, and chillingly familiar. "You're awake," his voice crackled over the encrypted comm. "I wondered if the stories were true." "I've always been awake," Mara replied, voice calm, almost serene. "And I've always known you'd come back." Their jets twisted and turned in the moonlight, weaving a complex aerial ballet that defied expectation. Mara executed a high-G roll, narrowly avoiding simulated missile fire from Vale's systems. He countered instantly, banking sharply, almost anticipating her move before she made it. The dance of predator and prey had become a battle of equals, two legends pushing the limits of man and machine. Below, the base watched in stunned silence. Radar operators murmured disbelief, technicians whispered prayers, and Captain Cross's eyes were wide, riveted to the screens. She's unmatched," he muttered. Mara's mind was laser-focused. Every feint Vale had used in the past, every maneuver he had perfected, every strategy he had employed in missions they had flown together, she remembered. She anticipated, calculated, executed. Every instinct Wraith had honed over years of survival came alive in this night, this confrontation. Vale executed a sudden dive, his jet cutting a streak through the stars toward the jagged desert ridges below. Mara followed instinctively, pulling the throttle, twisting her jet into a mirror dive. Dust and moonlight blurred below as both pilots maneuvered with near-superhuman precision, their jets slicing through the night like metallic specters. "You haven't changed," Vale said over calm, voice tight, tinged with both admiration and anger. "Still calculating, still predicting, still Wraith." "And you," Mara replied, "forgot one thing: I've survived everything. I've grown stronger, faster, smarter. You've underestimated me." Vale's jet surged upward, engines screaming, attempting to force her into a tight spiral, but Mara anticipated the vector, twisting, rolling, breaking free, leaving him slightly off balance. The microseconds mattered. Every heartbeat mattered. A sudden flare streaked toward Mara, Vale testing her reflexes with near-perfect timing. She executed a split-S maneuver, flipping the jet upside down, letting the flare arc harmlessly past. She countered immediately, closing the distance, forcing Vale into a defensive pattern. The desert below was a tapestry of shadows and moonlight, mountains rising like jagged teeth, valleys swallowing light. Mara exploited the terrain, weaving her jet through the natural cover, forcing Vale to adjust constantly. Every maneuver pushed them both to the edge, engines straining, avionics screaming in warning tones. "You taught me everything I know," Vale admitted, voice tight, almost bitter. "And now I'm using it against you." Mara's lips curved into a faint, grim smile. "And I've remembered everything too." A microsecond became eternity as the two jets twisted in synchronized chaos, a deadly reflection of skill, instinct, and past intimacy. Mara feigned a dive, luring Vale into what seemed like a perfect attack vector. As he committed, she executed a vertical roll, snapping behind him in a flash, systems synchronized perfectly to neutralize his maneuvers. Below, radar operators gasped, technicians muttered, and Captain Cross whispered, almost awestruck, "She's unstoppable." Vale tried to pull another maneuver, a sudden roll and thrust toward the horizon, attempting to disengage and reposition, but Mara anticipated it. Her jet surged with precise calculation, engines screaming as she mirrored his movement, keeping him within her calculated kill zone. The tables had turned. Wraith had regained control. "Why, Carter?" she asked, voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Why betray everything we fought for?" Vale's calm was silent for a moment, then low, heavy with regret. I had to know if Wraith was still alive. If the legend was still the girl I trusted. I had to test you." "You could have asked," Mara said, voice bitter. "Instead, you attacked. You endangered lives." "I didn't have a choice," he admitted. "Not after Black Falcon, not after I vanished. I had to survive, and I had to see if the world still had Wraith." Mara's jaw tightened. Emotions roared inside her, anger, betrayal, relief, and the unmistakable adrenaline of combat. She had trained for this, survived worse, but this confrontation was a collision of past and present, a battle not just of skill, but of trust, memory, and destiny. Vale surged, attempting a high-speed climb, but Mara anticipated the vector. She cut across his trajectory, a perfect interception, forcing him to a tight maneuver that exposed his wing. In a split second, she disabled his digital interference, neutralizing the threat he had relied on to gain advantage. Game over, she whispered, calm, resolute. Vale leveled his jet, systems stabilizing, engines whining in protest. He exhaled, visor reflecting the desert moonlight. You Wraith, you're still incredible. Mara leveled her aircraft as well, engines roaring, pulse steady, eyes sharp. And you, she said, voice low, should have remembered that the ghost you hunt isn't a girl lost. She's the legend who survived impossible odds. They hovered in the night sky for a tense heartbeat, neither moving, the desert stretching beneath them like a silent witness. Then, slowly, Vale banked, engines softening, acknowledgement in every subtle movement. The fight was over, not with destruction but with recognition. The two jets descended back toward the base, engines humming steadily. Mara landed smoothly, brakes screeching against the tarmac, the desert wind carrying away the echoes of a battle no one but the sky itself had witnessed. Vale followed, landing nearby, his jet powering down with an almost reverent quiet. Abrams, Cross, and the base crew watched in awe as Mara stepped out of her cockpit. The visor came off slowly, revealing her composed, unreadable expression. Vale removed his helmet as well, revealing a mixture of relief, respect, and unspoken regret. You're alive, he said simply. Mara nodded, her eyes steely but calm. I've always been alive. Wraith never died. Vale's jaw tightened, and now everyone knows. Mara exhaled, letting the adrenaline ebb slightly. The battle was over. The legend had returned. The ghost was no longer a shadow in the night. She had reclaimed her place in the skies, faced her enemy, and emerged victorious, not just with skill but with the strength that comes from surviving betrayal, isolation, and impossible odds. The desert night seemed to hold its breath, the stars shimmering as if witnessing the resolution of a story written across the sky. Wraith had returned, the legend restored, and Carter Vale, the only one who had ever challenged her, had acknowledged it. Mara Hale, Ghost Tech Wraith, smiled faintly beneath the moonlight. The skis had tested her, the enemy had challenged her, and the past had confronted her, but she had survived. She had prevailed. And the world, the base, the skis themselves would remember her name. The legend was alive. The ghost had returned, and the desert night would never forget the roar of Wraith.